Number 3. Sacculina Carsini. Imagine you're on a gray, low-tide flat on the North Atlantic coast. Cold mud squeezing your heels, air smelling like rusty metal and kelp. You've been pulling mussels off rocks and poking at crab traps because your brain loves free seafood. You cut your finger on barnacle shards, clean it in the shallow water, and a dot you'd swear was sand goes up your hand and kisses your wrist. You don't feel a sting, you don't feel anything. You just keep walking while the parasite claims you as its new house. Sacculina carsini is a parasitic barnacle that targets shore crabs, especially the European green crab. Unlike the barnacles we see stuck to rocks or ship hulls, it doesn't build a shell and mind its own business. It injects a tiny living seed that grows inside the crab, sterilizes it, and makes the host raise a parasite brood sac as if it were its own eggs. If it's a male crab, it manipulates his hormones so profoundly that he is functionally feminized, so the crab takes care of the parasite's eggs without realizing they're not his. It's important that you know that most of the parasites in this video can't actually do any of these things with humans. But because we have the power of animation on our side, we will pretend that they can for the sake of the video, though we don't have to pretend for the last one. Once it settles in, your body hits a pause button. You feel weirdly clumsy, and simple things like gripping and walking straight start glitching, like your limbs aren't taking your calls. Most of the food you eat stops fueling you and gets rerouted to the parasite. After a while, a soft, pale mound with a tiny pore swells just below your belly button. That's the externa, a brood sac the parasite built. Inside, the female packs thousands of eggs at the same time. But for them to develop, a tiny male larva must find the sac and slip in. Once that happens, the parasite spawns on a schedule, and you start guarding and cleaning the sac like it's your own child. At that point, all your instincts bend toward tending the externa. You're not exactly sick, you're repurposed, a caretaker for something that isn't yours. If you're male, this is when you notice your willy is completely gone. It wasn't out of nowhere. Your desire went to 0 weeks ago, morning wood doesn't happen anymore, and you can only cuddle the lump like it's a baby. Not only that, the parasite has completely feminized you. All your male traits are gone, and your abdomen has become wider, turning into a shape better for carrying the externa. This hormone manipulation is so extreme that in some real-life cases, crabs were observed growing functional ovaries after infection. At the end of the cycle, when the embryos in the externa are fully formed and must enter seawater to continue developing, the parasite induces your mind to go to the shore. When you get there, the pore opens, and many plumes explode from your belly into the water. The mound deflates, but then inflates again, because the root work inside you is permanent and the sac is just its way out. You keep returning on schedule, guarding and ventilating a project that isn't yours. You survive the attack, but are permanently castrated, and you will live according to the parasite's will for the rest of your life. Number 2. Leucochloridium Paradoxum. Imagine you're in your backyard on a hot Saturday, mixing a bucket of bird shit and compost to feed the tomatoes. You break up the clumps with your gloved hands, pull weeds, and stir the soil until it looks rich and dark. You wipe sweat with your wrist, then take a quick sip from your water bottle without thinking. A speck from the mix sticks to the mouth of the bottle. Later, you snack on a cherry tomato right from the vine, dirt still under your nails, and something gritty gets in between your teeth. A Leucochloridium is a flatworm known for its bizarre life cycle that turns snails into true zombies. Although the adult is only about 1.5 millimeters long, the larval stage is striking. It develops elongated, green and white striped structures that look like giant caterpillars inside the snail's eyes. It's incredibly disgusting, but when you understand why they evolved to do that with their eyes, you will find it absolutely genius. The cycle begins when the parasite's eggs are shed in the droppings of birds, which are the definitive hosts. If you accidentally eat one of these eggs, the larvae would hatch and develop inside you. You'd feel stomach cramps and fatigue like with most intestinal worms, but in just a couple of days, the larvae migrate into the host's eyes. There they form large, multicolored, pulsating tubes, popularly called brood sacs, which occupy the space of the eyes. These swollen, striped, and visibly writhing structures mimic caterpillars or grubs, making them extremely attractive to birds, who are predators of caterpillars. Now this is what makes these parasites so incredible. Beyond the physical change, a Leucochloridium also manipulates the host's behavior and turns it into a zombie. Normally you'd avoid light and exposed spots, but infected hosts venture out during the day into bright areas, climbing trees and going as high as they can. The infected eye stalks are packed with sporocysts that pulse conspicuously in sunlight, and this whole show serves one purpose: to make the eyes visible and extremely appetizing to birds. When a bird mistakes the pulsating tentacles for caterpillars and pecks them, it ends up ingesting the parasite. You may die or lose your eyes, but you could technically survive if not completely eaten alive. Inside the bird, the parasite matures and reproduces sexually in the digestive tract, releasing eggs and feces and closing the parasite's cycle. The infected snail becomes a puppet that sacrifices its survival and reproduction just so the parasite can reach its final host. But as brutal as that was, it's absolutely nothing compared to what's next. Up until now, we've only imagined what would happen if these parasites targeted us. But this last one is the only parasite on the list that actually infects humans, and it's also the deadliest of them all. Number 1. Naegleria fowleri. Imagine you're at a warm lake on a late summer afternoon. You jump off the dock, go under, and a rush of water shoots up your nose. You don't feel it, you just wipe your face and keep swimming. But in that moment, a tiny amoeba in the water slips into your nasal passages. It crawls up to the thin area high inside your nose, then squeezes through that lining and travels along the nerve that leads to your brain. You can't catch this by drinking water. It has to go up the nose with force, like during a dive or when someone uses a neti pot with untreated tap water. That's the normal first contact, and that's how the infection begins. Naegleria fowleri is a free-living microscopic amoeba found in warm fresh water and soil, famous for causing a rare and extremely lethal brain infection in humans. It's popularly nicknamed the brain-eating amoeba because it causes primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, an extremely destructive inflammation of the brain. It's the only species in the genus known to infect people, and you're about to understand why it's so dangerous. The amoeba penetrates the nasal mucosa and migrates along the olfactory nerve to the brain. Inside the central nervous system, it completely destroys brain tissue, feeding on it and triggering a severe inflammatory response. Early symptoms can include severe headache, fever, nausea, and vomiting. These will quickly progress to stiff neck, confusion, hallucinations, seizures, and possibly a coma. Tragically, the illness advances rapidly and is almost always fatal, usually about a week after symptoms begin. The case fatality rate exceeds 97%, making it by far the deadliest parasite ever, and only a handful of patients have ever survived. Unfortunately, there's no fully effective established treatment. Drugs like amphotericin B have been used experimentally, but diagnosis is usually late and the prognosis tends to be poor. The only good news is that Naegleria infections are extremely rare, though they often appear in the news because of the high mortality. The only possible way you could prevent this from happening to you is to keep untreated water out of your nose. So please, the next time you have a cold and a congested nose, do not use tap water to rinse it.